I think it's going to work. Magic. Here we go. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. So negative 8 plus or minus the square root of, now 4 times 2 times 3.
24.
All right, and then 64 minus 24 is
40.
So we have 40 all over 4. So negative 8 plus or minus 2 radical 10 over 4. And then we can reduce by...
It's negative 2 plus or minus 1.
Now be careful.
Plus or minus 1.
So,
I forgot. 4 plus or minus 1 over 2. But, yeah.
everybody good with that? Everybody good? All right, let's try the next one. So we'd say negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4. Well, this was like the same problem, right? X equals negative 8 plus or minus the square root of 52 over 2. So x equals negative 8 plus or minus, I think it's 2 radical 13 over 2, right? Very good. Remember, 52 is just 4 times 13. All right. Now, number 6 is a nice little problem. So make yourself a note. All right, 12x squared minus 4x minus 2 equals 0. Now, what can I do to make the problem easier?
Just factor.
Divide by 2. Yep, divide by 2. So we'd have 6x squared minus 2x minus 1 equals 0. All right, if you do that, that'll save you a bunch of time. Okay, so now x equals 2 plus or minus the square root of 2 squared, 4 minus 4 times 6 times negative 1 all over. So now we have x equals 2 plus or minus the square root of, is that 28? Look at that. And then, right, then we can break that down to x equals 2 plus or minus 2 root 7. And then we divide by 2, right? 1 plus or minus the square root of 7 all over 6. Well, because, again, remember, you can only divide by what goes into all 3. You can only divide by what goes into all 3 of them. You go down this? Any questions?
Wait, so 2 and 7 is
28 breaks down to 4 times 7.
oh,
Square root of 4 is 2. 2 radical 7. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, it'll just reduce down. All right? It'll reduce down.
I didn't get that when it plugged in like that. I didn't divide by 2. Yeah, I didn't get that.
When you didn't divide by 2?
Yeah.
All right, I'll show you a mistake. All right, so let's just pretend you didn't see that. All right, if you didn't see that, we'll just go from here. So it would be x equals 4 plus or minus the square root. 4 squared is 16 minus 4 times 12 times negative 2, right?
Mm-hmm.
All over 24.
Yeah.
So now x is equal to 4 plus or minus the square root. 48 times 2 is 96. So it's,
112.
I think, 112. And then 112 can break down. Right. So x equals 4 plus or minus 4 radical 7 over 24, right? And now we divide by 4. So x equals 1 plus or minus the radical 7 over 6. Same answer. Good now?
Yeah.
All right. Here we go. Let's take a look at question number 8. Completing the square, move the 7 over. So x squared plus 6x equals negative 7. Take half and square. X squared plus 6x plus 9 plus 9. All right. Any questions with that so far? What?
Can you do that the other way? X plus 7 and then x plus
Are you mean you're trying to factor? No, because it says what?
Oh.
Solve by completing the square plus the plus 7 plus 1 doesn't work anyway. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because 7 and 1 would make 8. Yes. Half of 6
Oh,
and then squared. Yeah, you forgot it. You have to square it. Half and square the middle term. Everybody good with that? So now it always factors into whatever the half was. So that's x plus 3 squared equals 2. Agreed? And then you take the square root. So x plus 3 equals plus or minus the square root of 2. X equals negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 2. What? You got a question? Remember, you take half of 6 and square it. That's how I got 9. Yes?
When you do that thing where you use like negative 3 and then you do like negative 3 plus 2 and negative 3 minus 2.
Very good question. If it wasn't the square root, I would do that. Right? Because you can add negative 3 plus 2 and negative 3 minus 2. All right. Put a star by number 10. That's the hard one because it's going to be a fraction. All right. So please pay attention to the fractions. All right. So x squared minus 3x equals 5. Now, you can't take half of 3, so just leave it as 3 over 2. And then you just square it. Square the numerator, I get what? Square the denominator, I get 4. So all you're doing is you're adding 9/4. You're adding 9/4. Not that hard. Now, it always factors into whatever the half was. So the half was negative 3/2. Now 5, remember, is 20/4. So 20/4 plus 9/4 is what? 29/4. Everybody with me? Now you take the square root. So x minus 3 over 2 equals plus or minus the square root of 29 over 2. How did I get that? Yeah, you can take the square root of 4, but you cannot take the square root of 9. Come on.
Why did you do the 3 over 2 squared?
Well, because this always factors into whatever the half was. That's the quickest way to do that. Now you just add 3/2 to both sides. So x is equal to 3/2 plus or minus the square root of 29 over 2. They have a common denominator, so most of the time they write it as that. To solve a square,
It's already squared. It was 9/4. Oh, the x is squared. But why why'd you put it in first?
Well, because I have to factor this. This becomes a perfect square, which that is equal to that. The reason why I do that is because now I can take the square root of both sides. All right, look those over. All right. All right, now for number 12, we isolate the x squared. So at this stage, you should be able to tell me x squared equals 49 over 25. And then you take the square root of both sides, right? So, nope. Nope.
Oh,
Plus
x
or
equals
minus.
Yeah, everybody forgets that now, guys. You need to try to make yourself a note so you don't make that mistake tomorrow. Plus or minus. There's two solutions to a quadratic. All right, now number 14, 2x squared plus x minus 10 equals 0. Now, does this factor? All right, because I'd like to factor it if it's possible. 2 times negative 10 is what? Are there factors of negative 20 that make a positive 1? And the answer is yes, 4 and 5. So we know it'll factor. All right, that's the quickest way. So here we go, 2 sets of parentheses, 2x and x, and it would be very good, plus 5 and minus 4. Very good. So 2x plus 5 equals 0, x minus 4 equals 0. So you should be able to say x equals negative 5 halves or x equals 4. Everybody good?
Are you allowed to do x equals b plus or minus in the rad?
You could do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because it just says solve.
Okay.
Right? The first 4 problems on the test are going to be solved by quadratic formula, solved by completing the square.
Okay.
There's 2 of each. And then the rest of them are solved however you want.
Okay.
All right? We're going to get everything on this worksheet you have to know how to do. Everything on here you have to know how to do. Everything on here you have to know what to do. All right? The good news for some of you is there's really only just one graph. All right? And again, that's just a 3-step process for the most part. All right? To me, that's the easiest thing. Plus, I don't even mind if you use your calculator to check your work. So, but you still have to know how to find the vertex, axis symmetry, y-intercept. Very simple. Very simple. All right, so here we go. Isolating first, divided by 3, correct? So we have x plus 1 squared equals 8. X plus 1 equals, you should be able to say plus or minus 2 radical 2. So x equals negative 1 plus or minus 2 radical 2. Anybody have any issues? What?
Where did 3 go?
Divided by 3. What is divided by 3 is 8? Yes, ma'am.
When would you distribute?
You would not. You can't distribute in a square. Right? You can't distribute in a square. That's why we isolate it. Okay? All right. Here, isolating the x plus 1 squared, so I would add 6 and then divide by 3. So if I add 6, what do I get?
15.
If I divide by 3, I get... Now look, guys, I am hoping everybody in here can just write down x plus 1 squared equals what?
5.
That's what I hope you can do. Right? Is everybody with me on that? You should be able to do that. Now we just take the square root, so...
X plus 1 equals plus or minus
And so x equals...
1 plus or minus.
1, that's not that hard.
So the square root of 5 is 5?
Square root of 5 is just the square root of 5. You can't break it down. All right? Number 20 now is even easier. Square root, right? So 3x minus 7 equals plus or minus the square root of 17. Now I do what? Move the 7. 3x equals 7 plus or minus the square root of 17. So x equals 7 plus or minus the square root of 17 all over 3.
Like, can that also be called radical 17?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, right. All right, let's check out 22. How do I undo a square root? Square. So now I have 3x minus 4 equals x squared. That's a quadratic, so we have to set it equal to 0. So x squared minus 3x plus 4 equals 0. That kind of looks like it factors, but guess what? It does not factor. So quadratic formula would be best. Yes, sir. Well, because you say the first times the last is positive 4. Do you agree? I'm trying to get negative 3. How do I get negative 3? Some people would say 1 and 4, but they either both have to be positive or they both have to be negative. And that doesn't equal negative 3.
How did you get a positive?
Okay, so I moved everything over, didn't I?
Oh.
Right? So that became good.
Wait, but if you do positive 1 and negative 4,
Yeah, but you can't do positive 1 and negative 4, because if I multiply those together, it gets negative 4, not positive 4. Okay? All right, so now let's do the quadratic formula. So the quadratic formula would be x equals 3 plus or minus the square root of 9, 4 times 1 times 4. So x equals 3 plus or minus, So somebody said it. What is it? Yeah, it's no solution. You can't have a square root of a negative. So after all that, it was no solution. Everybody good?
In parentheses, like the 4, why is it negative? Why did you make it a positive 4 up there? Because it's a negative 4.
I know. So what I did was I took this and I moved it over. When I move it over, it becomes a positive. When I move the 3x, it becomes a negative. All right? All right. 24 cross multiply. So I end up with 3x squared minus 4x equals 3, right? Very good. And then 3x squared minus 4x minus 3 equals 0. Now multiply the first times the last. Negative 9 and negative 4. Are there factors of negative 9 that make negative 4? No. So it's just a quadratic, right? So x equals 4 plus or minus the square root 16 minus 4 times a times c all over. So x equals 4 plus or minus the square root of 16. And that would be plus 36, is that correct? All over 6. So that equals 4 plus or minus the square root of 52. Did I agree with that? So 4 plus or minus 2 radical 13 over 6, right? Very good.
Did you say that
You divide by 2.
Now we can divide by 2. So 2 plus or minus, I'm just going to put it there. Right? What?
So when you divide by 2, doesn't it turn into just 2 plus or minus 1 radical 26?
No, here's your mistake. You didn't break down 52 to this yet.
Oh,
That's 52.
oh, yeah.
52 is 4 times 13, right?
Yeah.
All right, everybody take a look at It's 26. Everybody should look at that and say, well, I can factor that one. Yeah, right? Yep. Perfect. So in this case, x minus 3 times x minus 3 equals 0. So x equals 3. And just remember that that's called a double root. All right, it's called a double root. Yes. No, that's just information for you. All right, this one's like, again, what we did in the first day one. All right, just distributing here. So negative 3x minus 12 minus 42x minus 12 equals 0, right? So negative 45x minus 24 equals 0. Negative 45x equals 24, so x equals negative 24 over 45, which can be divided by, I think, negative 8 over 15. Are you good with that?
Yeah.
What?
Why is it a negative?
And the positive.
If you divide by 3,
What difference does the negative go, the top or the bottom?
Wait, where do you pull the negative?
If I say,
Divide by?
if I say 1 divided by negative 2, is that the same as negative 1 divided by 2?
but when you move the 45 over,
Oh, you're dividing.
Well, that's sure. And then you're dividing the negative.
oh,
The 24 is negative. Come on, kiddos. All I did was I moved the negative 24 over. That became positive 24, and then I divided by negative 45. If you want to move the 45 over, that's perfectly good. Negative 24 equals 45x. Negative 24 over 45 equals x. Same answer.
oh, so you just divide that.
Same answer. Agreed? Right? All right. Now again, let's isolate the radical. Subtract 2 and divide by 5. What does that give me?
6x minus 5%.
Everybody happy with that? Everybody good? Now what? Square. 6x minus 5 equals 49. 6x equals 54. So x equals 9.
Wait, how did you get the 7?
So subtract 2, then divide by 5. You see it now, right? You're isolating the radical. Yes, ma'am.
How did you square instead of do a square root?
Because it's a square root. How do I undo a square root? We square. How do I undo a square? We square root. I'm trying to show you they're inverses of each other. If you have a square, you use a square root. If you have a square root, you use a square. All right, here we go. Now we're going to graph. All right. Let's see what comes up. All right. So again, all right, x equals for your axis of symmetry. Come on, guys. Some of you are worried about this. Don't worry. It's just 3 steps, right? X equals negative b over 2a. Negative 2 over 2 times 1 equals what? Negative 1. Does everybody agree with that? Vertex. So y equals negative 1 squared plus 2 times negative 1 minus 8. Y equals 1 minus 2 minus 8. Y equals, what is that? Negative 9. So your vertex is negative 1 comma negative 9. Right? And then your y-intercept is 0 comma c, which is 0 comma negative 8. Come on, we can do that. All right. So what I want to do is, I know I'm going down, correct? going down a bunch. So what I'm going to do is I want to make my graph, like my, so everybody see what I did there, right? Then I'm going to make my axis symmetry at x equals -1. That's your axis symmetry, agreed? Now we plot the point -1, -9. One, two, three, four, five, six, 7, 8, 9. And then we graph the y-intercept 0, -8. Use the y or the axis symmetry. Anybody have any issues with that? It's the y-intercept. Look right here. Look what I'm circling. All right, that's all it is.
How did you pick like the black lines?
Well, because I knew I was going down -9, right? So I had to think about it. I'm making an x and y axis. I have to go down 9. So I put it up high so I could go down 9. Right? Normally it would be what? If I think about it like this. If I put it right here, then I don't have enough room. So I just did what? I moved it so I would have room. Okay, 34. All right, let's take a look now. All right, so here we go. Axis of symmetry. X equals 4 over 2 times -1. So everybody agree that's -2? So y equals negative parentheses -2 squared minus 4 times -2 minus 3. So y equals, now here's what's hard. Please look at the math on that. Is it +1?
Yeah.
Right, so then vertex -2, comma 1. Does everybody agree with that? Say.
Why did you get -4?
Because you square first, true, and then you multiply second. All right, that's why we can't distribute. All right, and then my y-intercept is what?
0, -3.
0, -3. Do you have any issues? Right. One, 2. Then we're going -2, 1. Everybody with me? And then my y-intercept is 0, -3, -1, -2, -3. Count over how many? 2. So I count over 2 more. That would be right here. Yes.
I'm just confused.
Well, so listen to me. Come on now. Not everything. Did you get that?
Yeah, so the blue
Stop
line is negative.
and listen. Did you get that?
Mhm.
You with me? So that's x equals -2. So draw x equals -2. So you're not confused with everything now. Come on. Now I plug in -2. Did you get 1 or not? So you're still not confused with everything.
I'm confused how you
Okay, so
placed
now we're plugging in -2, 1. Do you agree? So I went -2 up 1. Do you agree? When you're plotting a point. You with me or not?
Yeah.
So you understand how I got this point right there, correct?
You went,
Left 2 and up 1.
okay.
You with me now,
Yeah.
right? Does that make better sense?
Mhm.
So this is good now, right?
Yeah.
Now do you understand this?
You went down 3.
Down 3. Then you use the axisymmetry. Good. Come on.
What's the formula for the vertex?
Plug the number into the equation.
So
Look right here,
x
kiddo.
equals -2.
No. Yes. I mean, you plug at watch up there on the board. I'm plugging x in here, that number in there.
Oh, okay.
Right? That's all. All right, last one, guys. All right, now why is this one annoying?
It's a
It's a
fraction.
fraction, I think, right? So here we go. Why is there so much noise outside? So, axis of symmetry. Y, not y, but x equals negative b over -4, which is 1/4. Does everybody agree with that? Everybody agreeing with me? So now, be careful. Vertex. Y equals -2 times 1/4 squared plus 1/4 plus 5. Everybody okay with that? So now, y equals -2 times 1/16 plus 1/4 plus 5. Y equals -1/8 plus 1/4 plus 5. Does everybody agree with that? Does everybody agree? Now, common denominator is 8. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
So this would be 2/8 and -1/8. Right. Now, sometimes it's just easier to write 5 1/8, right? Because you know where that is. If I said 41/8, then you didn't have to tell me what 41/8 is. Does everybody agree?
Yeah.
So hopefully you understand what I'm saying. If you wrote it as 41/8, that's perfectly fine. All right? So now my y-intercept is 0.5. Is everybody good? All right, so let's just freehand it, kind of like what I did before. All right, if you want to put a graph up there, go for it. So x equals 1/4, which is kind of annoying. Do you agree? So I have to go through x equals 1/4, which would be something like this. Is everybody agreeing? Then we go we plot 1/4, 5 1/8. So I would just mark up here 5 1/8. I'm totally fine with that. Is everybody good with that? And now the y-intercept is what?
0.
Which is 1/4 over, so I'm 1/4 over. Does everybody see that? There's only one graph. All right, I'm just going to tell you it's probably going to open up. It's not going to be a -1. It's very straightforward. Nothing, probably no fractions. All right, trying to make it easy on you. All right, but listen, I need you to review. The most important part of the lesson is the middle part, where you have to think about what to do. And that's hard to do. All right, you have to actually do the thinking. All right, so review that.
Are the graphing quadratics on like an entrance exams at placement?
Yes. I think we